Joseph Smith had a lot to say concerning the beasts seen by the prophets in Scripture, including John, Daniel, Isaiah, and others discussed in previous episodes in this series. Joseph makes it clear that except in specific instances, the beasts that the prophets saw were not beasts at all, but images of beasts. Joseph was indicating that the beasts were symbolic representations. Joseph drew upon his knowledge of the ancient Hebrew text of the Bible and his prophetic calling to make an important distinction in translation, which is transparent in our King James Version. Using the beasts of Daniel as an example, the prophet renders what he believes to be a proper translation of the original text. He then extends the principle to all cases of beasts seen by the prophets and recorded in Scripture. The beasts of Daniel referred to by Joseph are found in chapter 7 of the ancient prophet's book. The translation of the King James Version does not indicate that what Daniel saw in his dream was an image of a beast or four beasts in this case. Furthermore, none of the current Hebrew texts of the Bible reflect the distinction claimed by Joseph. The Hebrew text used in the translation of the King James Version is called the Masoretic and uses chaiva for beast, with no modifier signifying that it was an image of a beast. So, was Joseph incorrect in his statements about the images of the beasts? Joseph Smith approached the translation of ancient texts, including the Bible, in a unique way unlike any other before or after him. In fact, his so-called inspired translation of the Bible, now called the Joseph Smith translation of the Bible, can hardly be called a translation at all. Scholars, both supportive of Joseph Smith as well as his critics, have struggled to come up with a designation of Joseph Smith's revision of the biblical text that encompasses the entire process. In truth, there isn't a word that can fully describe what Joseph did. Perhaps the best word is restoration. Joseph Smith restored the original text of the Bible in translation. Translation, as is commonly understood, requires an original text from which the wording is converted into another language. Yet, as is well known, Joseph did not have an original Hebrew text of the Old Testament or a Greek text of the New Testament in his possession. Instead, he reviewed the King James English translation of both Testaments to enable the creation of an amended translation. Joseph made technical corrections in grammar and syntax, added parenthetical interpretations, changed some of the wording, and inserted new wording, including lengthy passages, some of which are now included in the scriptural canon. The latter insertions were the result of revelations he received from the Lord. Joseph never completed his work on the revision of the Bible, and not everything he learned was documented in the Bible revision manuscripts. Joseph did occasionally demonstrate his knowledge of the original biblical texts, which were never set down in writing. For example, in his famed King Follett address, Joseph clarified a point of translation from the original Hebrew text of Genesis. Joseph claimed, that a word was added to the original by an old Jew without any authority. Of course, Joseph Smith never owned the original Hebrew text of Genesis, nor did he ever write down this change in the text. His process was only one of writing down a more correct translated version. The point here is that Joseph Smith had prophetic access, or more precisely, the access of a seer to the original text of the Bible without having possession of the actual physical manuscripts. The reality of the corrupted nature of the biblical text required Joseph to translate in this manner. As Joseph correctly pointed out, much of the original text was simply missing. Even with the earliest manuscripts we now have of the Bible, Joseph could not have produced a correct translation of the portions which had been taken or lost before the manuscripts were compiled into our current Bible. One cannot, after all, translate something that is not there. In relation to Joseph's comments concerning Daniel's beast and the images of these beasts, as in his comments in the King Follett sermon, Joseph is demonstrating his knowledge of an original text of Daniel's dream that is no longer extant. The image of the beast of the original was one of the many parts of the Bible that was either lost or deliberately edited out of the text and is no longer to be found in our oldest manuscripts. Hence, neither the Masoretic Hebrew manuscript of the Old Testament or any translation of this manuscript will reflect the wording, the image of a beast. Joseph explicitly stated, when he made his comments on the images of the beast, that he was referring to the original Hebrew. This is not a reference to the Masoretic text, which Joseph never saw, but the original Hebrew text, which predated the Masoretic and had not yet been corrupted by scribes and copyists over the centuries.